Welcome to Biztech Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies operating globally, talking about their solutions and how they make a difference to their customers' businesses. Now, today our conversation is about IT financial management, and our guest today is Ben Allard, Vice President and General Manager, APAC at Apptio. Apptio was founded in 2007 and is the leading provider of cloud-based technology business management software that helps CIOs manage the business of IT. Now, here to tell us more, welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks, Brian.
Now, Ben, could you start by giving us an overview of Apptio and its history?
Yeah, so Apptio really grew out of some conversations that our founder, Sunny Gupta, had with a range of different CIOs very early on when the financial crisis was happening back in sort of the late 2000s timeframe. And it was really a need for the CIO to have more value-based conversations and make more data-driven decisions in order to be able to deliver value to the business and to the stakeholders. So that's how Apptio grew, and that's how the company sort of expanded based on that vision.
And what does your Asia Pacific footprint look like? You started out in the region in 2019?
So we started in Asia in 2019. We're headquartered in Singapore, and we look at focusing on a number of key markets across the Asia business. We look at primarily Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and then we look at other opportunities across the region that are a good fit for our business as well.
Now, I want to ask you about Apptio's SaaS solutions. Now, you claim that you help organizations make better decisions so they can analyze, plan, optimize, control, and collaborate. Tell us exactly how Apptio does this and what sort of services you provide your clients.
Yes, so look, the way that Apptio supports those outcomes, Brian, think about all the various different data sources that exist across a business and a technology function. So whether they be solutions that are responsible for the finance part of the business, so your general ledger, your financial systems of management and record, or whether they be operational systems of record. So whether you talk about a ServiceNow platform, or whether you talk about using solutions, cloud-based solutions and providers like AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba Cloud. What we do is we are an aggregator of all that information, both from a financial and from an operational perspective. We provide context as to what that means from a business side. So what technology solutions are supporting the business products that the organization delivers for your customers? And is the technology supporting the right types of outcomes for the business and the experience that the business is trying to deliver for their end customers?
Now, Ben, one of the critical things that you do is really deliver cost savings to customers, isn't it? Give us a sense of what kind of cost savings that you deliver and where did that really come from?
Yeah, so look, on average, when we look at the application of technology business management as a discipline and our solution within an organization, we'll typically look at savings in the range of 3 to 5% of operational expense on an annual recurring basis. So, for example, we look at things like where there may be waste that's occurring within the business. A perfect example may be cloud-based resources that an organization has procured and is running, but potentially aren't well utilized within the organization. So there's an opportunity to be able to right-size those resources based on the support of the business applications and the capabilities that the business is delivering for their customers. That would be one example. The other one may be just effective use of labor, right? So where an organization is using vendors in terms of to be able to support providing key capabilities to market. Do they have the right mix of vendors based on the business criticality of certain applications within their portfolio as well? So looking at being able to right size and make sure they have the right resources working on the right activities.
And, Ben, I'm going to share one example, and I want you to share a couple of specific examples of how you've helped your clients. But I still remember from my days of working in IT, there was once an IT audit done on a large conglomerate in Malaysia. And they found that the conglomerate over a 10-year period had 20% more SAP licenses than they actually needed. And so that's an amazing amount of money to spend without realizing you really didn't need it. Now, could you share some examples of how you've helped your clients?
So that would be a perfect example, Brian. So when we look at, for example, organizations that are now using software as a service more readily in terms of to support their business needs, that's exactly the type of use case that we can look at. So whether it be looking at Microsoft Office 365, whether it be looking at SAP, whether it be looking at ServiceNow, we can provide visibility into how many licenses have potentially been procured, how have those licenses actually been deployed within the organization, how frequently those licenses are actually being used, and then be able to form a conversation as to how can they actually right-size or potentially change that nature of that relationship with the vendor to make better use of that spend and right-size their usage and their license entitlement with particular software vendors.
Now, increasingly, because of the size of the investments, IT financial performance is now really a top-level board concern. What kind of solutions does Apptio provide corporates to analyze and optimize their technology spend?
Yes, so a prime example, Brian, would be providing visibility into how much investment is going into running the business versus growing the business versus potentially changing and driving innovation. So one of the things we can do is surface to a board level conversation, how much is it costing us to run technology within the organization? Where are there opportunities to be able to improve efficiency? And where is there opportunity to be able to change where that spend is occurring so that it goes into a growth or goes into an innovation agenda, which may mean the ability to be able to deliver, a mobile banking application earlier than expected. It may be the ability to be able to deliver new customer capabilities that may enhance and retain customers within the marketplace. So how do we shift the relationship in terms of the funding so that CIOs can do more with less and accelerate the delivery of business outcomes for the board?
And so, Ben, this has been a top board level concern in the past 2 years, digital transformation. And obviously, a lot of this transformation has been forced upon companies as a result of the pandemic. Walk us through some of the things that have been done to really help accelerate their businesses as a result of business transformation.
Yeah, so a perfect example, Brian, is when you look at an organization that's trying to apply digital and accelerate the delivery of digital capabilities within their business. One of the things that we find is that there's a need to be able to accelerate the pace at which the organization can move. So how can we provide the right set of data to the finance stakeholders, the technology stakeholders, the business stakeholders in order to be able to move faster? So if we look at top performing organizations, and there was a recent study by McKinsey, they have the capability to be able to look at their investments across their business and be able to make decisions to be able to change investment strategies, whether that be on a monthly cadence, even down to potentially a weekly cadence. So a lot of the things that we're focused on is how do we provide visibility into where those technology investments are occurring? How are those technology investments performing? What's happening in terms of market conditions and changes or potentially changes in strategy? And then rapidly go down the path of potentially being able to reallocate technology investments in order to be able to support that strategy and those outcomes. So whether that be accelerating how frequently an organization can do forecasting, for example, within their finance organization, the ability to be able to look at value realization of technology investments and be able to say, is the business case that we put forward originally, is that actually being delivered or not? And if it isn't being delivered, where do I have the opportunity to potentially change investment strategies?
So Ben, here's the interesting thing, and you talked about your McKinsey study. It's really about speed being critical to competing, not only just competing, but innovating as well. But one of the key things within that is you're enabling high performance organizations then to do both of these, compete and innovate. But culture is a very big part of it.
It is. Culture is fundamentally a change that an organization needs to go through in order to be able to adopt and move quickly. And so, for example, when we look at the finance part of the organization, the finance organization has to deal with all of the traditional processes and practices that are required to be able to report on corporate performance for the organization, to be able to look at annual planning, to be able to look at things like quarterly forecasting. So one of the things that we actually do is we have, or we use what we refer to as a standard taxonomy. So how do we bring the finance organization together with the technology organization, with the business stakeholders, so that they're all talking the same language, right? Because there's a lot of debate that typically happens within an organization as to what is an application? How do I look at costing an application? How do I determine the performance of an application? So one of the things we deal in terms of to address the cultural change is bring that standard language together across all of those three different stakeholders.
So, and that's a critical thing, and what you've just told me, because basically what you're doing is, as a technology provider, not only are you providing the tools, you are providing the client the roadmap as to how to bring them all together.
Yeah, exactly, Brian. So that includes, depending on the strategy that you're trying to execute, depending on the people that need to be empowered with the data to be able to make decisions around that strategy, regarding the use cases as to what they need to do and the information that needs to be surfaced, the insights that they need to be provided, and then the scenario analysis to be able to determine what's the impact of those decisions, sharing those with different stakeholders so that then you can actually inform and then execute on that strategy relatively quickly. That's really the role that we're providing.
So Forrester recently did a study on in 2020 on corporate spending on technology in Southeast Asia. And the findings were really quite interesting to me, because technology spending actually fell in 2020. So the Philippines experienced a highest decrease of negative 11.1%, Thailand negative 7.3%, Malaysia negative 6.2%, and Indonesia negative 4.2%. What's Apptio's perspective on this corporate spending and a reduction in spending across Southeast Asia? Because that's quite counterintuitive to what most people think.
Yeah, look, Brian, I think what's driving that reduction in spending, and specifically around the technology part of the organization, is largely driven by top-line business performance. So when we look at a lot of the disruption that's happened in the marketplace over the course of the last couple of years, it's driven pressures in terms of to be more operationally efficient. Technology is part of that particular operational cost to the business. And therefore, what it's doing is it's really forcing technology leaders to be able to look at doing, how do I do more with less? Because I'm still being asked to deliver digital outcomes. I'm still being asked to deliver that at pace in order to be able to drive business outcomes. But that reduction in terms of technology spending is really being driven by top-line operational pressures that the business is under.
Now, Ben, is also then, and I'm just thinking out aloud, part of that reduction is also greater efficiency, because we've seen a huge shift from on-premise to cloud over the pandemic. And obviously, it's gone from CapEx to OpEx. So is that part of the reason why we've seen this reduction in top-line numbers?
I think there's an element to that, Brian, because all organizations are looking at wanting to be more efficient with their use of technology resources. So how do they look at lowering the unit cost? How do they look at having conversations, for example, with business partners around their consumption of technology and influencing the consumption of technology? Those are things that are driving efficiency within the technology organization itself and helping to potentially lower technology cost. When you look at the cloud component and the increase in terms of operational expense, I think there's been a lot of promises around how cloud delivers a lower operational cost to the business. And in a lot of instances, that cloud spend has actually increased at an accelerated rate that was probably beyond what was projected and causing some organizations some potential pain as well. But efficiency is certainly something that's helping companies lower their operational expense in terms of their technology, but they're still being asked to do more with less.
Now, I want to move on to technology business management. And you're on the council, you're the vice president of the Technology Business Management Council in the Asia Pacific region. Walk us through what technology business management framework is and what the council is all about.
Yes, so Brian, the council is really about a couple of things. So technology business management as a framework at its core is really around having value-based conversations around technology investments. So again, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, it's bringing together a finance audience, a technology audience, a business audience in order to be able to have value conversations around technology investments. So that really is at its core what it's doing. The council itself has three core missions. One is around development of standards. So when I talked about that standard taxonomy earlier, it's really around the continued evolution and building of that taxonomy so that an organization can have that standard conversation across those different stakeholders. So whether you're talking about, what's the cost to run a particular piece of infrastructure, a platform, an application, that we're all having that same sort of conversation. So that's part of the standards. The other piece that we're focused on is community. So how do we bring together professionals across finance, technology, and the business to start maturing the discipline in terms of TBM within organizations? So whether that be helping an organization move from annual planning or quarterly forecasting to continuous forecasting, that may be one of those conversations that we're helping around the cultural change that needs to occur within an organization. And then the third pillar is around education. So how do we hold education courses in order to be able to help people understand what technology business management is and figure out what their level of maturity is, and how do they then start to adopt that within their organization as well?
Now, then how does Apptio then facilitate organizations to implement technology business management very quickly?
Yeah, so Apptio was the founder of the Technology Business Management Council, Brian. So we work very, very closely around all those elements of both standards, community, and in terms of the education as well. So what we do is our technology suite basically helps people accelerate the adoption of TBM, the rollout of TBM, and then making sure that they're getting the associated value that TBM promises, both in terms of speed of the organization, driving efficient use of technology, cost savings, and helping drive acceleration in terms of innovation. So our platforms are modular in nature. So depending on what an organization's level of maturity is around the TBM discipline, we also have the ability in terms of to be able to make sure it's the right on-ramp so that you can onboard particular parts of the application, the Apptio portfolio based on your level of maturity. So for example, if your focus is really around the adoption of cloud and making efficient use of public cloud resources, there is a set of applications within our portfolio called Cloudability. We can actually light that up and start you there so you can start to see value very, very quickly and then mature into some of the other disciplines.
Now, Ben, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation. Some people say as much as 15 years in 2 years. What are the lessons that tech companies can learn from the pandemic in terms of technology spending?
Oh, look, I think the first piece in terms of technology spending is the need to be able to have the right amount of funding in order to be able to support innovation and change. So when we look at a lot of the disruption that's happened within the marketplace, one of the things that organizations need to do is to be able to say, there's probably 3 to 5 different investments that I need to be making around the future of my business and getting ahead of the market. Now, not all of those 3 to 5 investments are potentially going to be successful, but there needs to be that funding that's available in terms of to be able to drive innovation and to be able to look at the forward level performance and what the capabilities an organization needs to deliver to market. So that's one component. The other component is also looking at more of the run and what I'd refer to as the business as usual part of the technology base as well. And informing people to be able to look at what we refer to as the asset lifecycle management of the technology that exists that a business is currently running today. So, a lot of the terms you hear around sweating assets, for example. So how do I elongate a technology investment as long as possible before I refresh or modernize? So one of the things that we've found is that technology organizations need to look at the life cycle of that asset and make sure that they're all funding the modernization of that over time. That's the other component. And then the other piece is that there's probably 2 buckets around what we refer to as sort of continuous improvement, Brian, which is making sure they have the right funding in terms of to be able to improve and grow the business. but also potentially to be able to address risk or compliance depending on the industry and the vertical the company's in as well.
Ben, it's been a fascinating conversation. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, look, I think the message to the audience, Brian, is technology is intrinsically more important to a business these days, given the need to be able to support digital capabilities for end customers. There's a need to be able to, a business to be able to operate at speed. And as you said, to be able to make sound financial decisions and be able to revisit those technology investment decisions on a continuous basis. So as you mentioned earlier, speed at which a business operates, making sound financial decisions and de-risking decisions in terms of having the right data across the different stakeholders is really critical for any organization, regardless of what your maturity is today and where you're trying to go in the future.
Now, Ben, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for taking your time to come on.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Brian.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Ben Allard, the Vice President and General Manager, APAC at Apptio, on Biztech Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our various social media platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.